Welcome to another episode of Civic Cipher. I'm your host, Ramses. Big shout out to my man Q Ward, who is indisposed this evening, but very much with us in spirit. A lot of stuff to talk about this week. But one of the best things that has happened to us is that we were able to book a guest, my favorite guest, who has been on the show before, but you know, she's in high demand these days. Her name is Dr. Camilla Westenberg, and she is joining us in the studio again for Civic Cipher. So once again, welcome.
Thank you.
Of course. Today we're going to talk a little bit about a lot, or if it's meaningful, we're going to talk a lot about some specific things. But I've been trying to really put this show off until I get to a point where I have the support or the knowledge and the language necessary to articulate what's going on fully. The issue, of course, I'm talking about is the voter suppression initiatives that have been taking place across the country. Now, most folks refer to them as initiatives to protect the integrity of voting, or whatever. There's this pretty language around all of them, and so it doesn't cause many people's ears to perk up. But my understanding is that historically, Black folks have been able to really see what's underneath that language, really what it is. Going back to Jim Crow and even further back in some instances. What's happening now in mass across the country is exactly the same. It's perhaps the climate also kind of lends itself to some of this stuff actually making some progress, and us really losing our capacity to vote, or otherwise it becoming diminished. And in the past few episodes that we've, mentioned these voter suppression initiatives, I have not been able to peel away many layers there. But I want to take this show, the next show, perhaps even the show after that, to really dive into that, really root out the source of this, and really examine what it is, and really explore what it is that we can do about it. Because I think, at least for me, I haven't been the most active, politically speaking, person my whole life. More recently, I've been made aware of exactly how much is, working against me, and these systemic issues that I refer to, how ingrained they are in life, and things that I take for granted actually can be challenged, but I would never think to challenge them. So I have to imagine that there are lots of folks out there who have a more passive type of attitude when it comes to, oh, well, that's just the way it is. And what I want to do is empower them while I'm being empowered to actually take action against these initiatives, these campaigns to really further disenfranchise us, and to keep the systems in power and in place that are currently in power and in place, above and beyond, what we're able to see and feel in our day-to-day lives, to any significant degree. I know a lot of us encounter a lot of surface level stuff, but the systems in place to keep us in the communities and keep us in the existing framework and limit our mobility and our options, those are the things I'm referring to specifically. So, one thing that we were able to talk about is, well, before I go any further, I don't think I gave you a proper introduction. And I want to make sure that I do this the right way. So I will do my best to introduce you to folks that haven't heard you on the show before. And then I want you to come in behind me and make sure that you fill in the gaps. So, Dr. Camilla Westenberg. When I met her, she was a professor an English professor at Phoenix College, and she was the chairperson, or what's the word I'm looking for?
I coordinated developmental English during that time, and I was advisor.
Advisor, that's the word I'm looking for. For the Black Student Union. And the reason that that's of particular importance to me is, well, you know, I don't use words like advisors because she was my teacher. She still is my teacher. You still are my teacher. But Dr. Westenberg caught me at a time in my life when things weren't so pretty. And she found that I was just kind of blowing in the wind. I'll spare you a long story, but she discovered me around campus and had no real direction. And she asked me to do some things. And for those of you who are aware of the dynamic that exists with Black women who are older than you, you understand that usually when someone tells you to do something, you do it. So I'm not going to go against the grain there. She asked me to enroll in her African American literature class, lit class, which I did because I didn't want to see her again and not have enrolled in the class. But this was all out of love, and it's a time in my life I'll never forget. It's really the basis of who I am as an adult and as a professional. And then further along in the story, of course, she asked me to attend the Black Student Union meetings. Later, we had some conversations about leadership potential, and she asked if I'd be interested in stepping into a leadership role. Ultimately, I became the president of the Black Student Union, and you know, on and on, the rest is history. So her functioning in those capacities really was very significant to me. She's also a member of the Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority. She serves as the vice chair of, okay, I'm going to get this wrong, but it's the Maricopa County chapter of the NAACP.
Second vice president.
Second vice president, sorry about that.
Of the Maricopa County.
Okay. And she is affiliated with the Lynx. And
I have to say top ladies of distinction.
Top
too.
ladies of distinction.
And the National Council of Negro Women. I have to,
Well,
I'll give them all some love. Okay.
Listen,
if
go
I
ahead.
don't.
I need people to understand who they're talking to and who they're listening
good.
to.
That's it.
Right,
yeah.
right.
No, just involved in community service
Very
organizations.
good. Okay. But very much a person who's visible out in the streets, out in the real world. Someone who has created a path for people like me to go from not really having a clear purpose or a real defined sense of, you know, self and my identity. There's reasons for that. You know, I had some issues that I was dealing with at that age, but just kind of keeping me straight and true. And some of those had to do with, you know, MLK youth celebrations, HBCU college fairs, hip hop to vote summits, you know, all things that you put on over the years, and that
you all put on.
Well, we all put on.
We
but
all
really,
put on.
you were the advisor.
Yeah.
And so, at least in the community where I live, here in Phoenix, Arizona, an extremely influential person, a woman who commands respect in every room she walks in. If I'm able to go to a place with her, it's like the best time, because everyone stops and, you know, they part, like, you know, to let her walk in and so forth. And so, again, an honor for you to be on the show.
It's a pleasure to be here, Ramses. It really is.
Absolutely. So, the last time you were on the show, we talked a lot about your long-standing relationship with white supremacy, with segregation, with, you know, these are things that you actually lived through in your lifetime. I remember you mentioned something on the last episode about not being able to try on shoes in a store because you were black when you were a little girl. I remember you saying something about your mother, I believe, having to take a portable bathroom with you in the car on road trips because you would not have been allowed to use.
Yeah, the restrooms.
Right. And so this was during your lifetime. And since then, you know, laws have been passed and things like that to prevent that. But you experienced it firsthand. And then, of course, when you were born, that was normal. It was normal to be second-class citizen and not be afforded the same opportunities, rights, and privileges as white folks in this country. So in my belief, you have a unique perspective of the goings on today. And again, it's very meaningful that you would show up today and we'd be able to talk about some of the things that are happening. So again, one of the things that we were able to talk about on the show so far is the success that was achieved in Georgia with respect to electing Joe Biden president of the United States. And one such initiative that took place that helped fuel his election in Georgia turning blue was a campaign called Souls to the Polls. And I want you to talk about what Souls to the Polls was and, you know, what has happened as a result of that.
Well, Souls to the Polls was an initiative by Stacey Abrams, and it was an effort and an energy of pulling African Americans together collectively at a time when it was convenient for them to go to the polls and vote.
Okay.
So Sunday worked well for them.
Right.
Black folks go to church.
Yep.
And to save their souls,
Yep.
and they just moved right on to the polls to continue to save their souls and their lives. And that is what that initiative was. And there were many other ways in which individuals went into the community to try to get people first registered and then to mobilize it. So there was and this is across the country. This is across the country. There was a considerable effort to get individuals registered to vote. That was the major thing. And then after that deadline, to continue and go to the next level and encourage them to go to the polls and to actually vote. So it was a matter of getting into places where you know people are, whether it's a barber shop, whether it's a beauty shop, whether it's a restaurant, whether it's soul food, whether it's at the park. It was a matter of going to places where you could find, in this instance, African Americans who would vote because we were really working to get Barack Obama to become president. That concept of having an African American as a president is something that was always articulated, but you never really thought that it would happen.
Right.
You know, you would say to a little boy, oh, you can be president one day. You need to do that. You can be president. But for it to really happen, to reach that plateau, wasn't something that we thought along the way that could actually be achieved necessarily. And when Barack Obama came along and we had advanced along the way and progressed in politics, we saw that the opportunity was there and the community came together to make it happen. And one of the things that we have to remember too is that many of the movements that we have had as it relates to the black experience in America has been led by a religious leader of some sort, whether it was the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, whether it was Reverend Al Sharpton. You know, there were ministers there. The Reverend Jesse Jackson. There were also always ministers. When you think of the Muslim faith, there was always, right. Yeah, there was always someone there of the faith who had faith. I'm not a very religious person, but there was a faith there that allowed those individuals to come to the forefront and to speak to the people and to motivate the people to do what they needed to do to assure that we got where we were going to get.
Sure.
And it was a progression from segregation to integration. It was a progression. And when it finally reached that point, the president, my goodness, we really came out in force to make sure that could happen. And it did. It did. And you have so many people who were elated. You have some people who left this earth who saw it happen. And they were in tears. My mother, who lost at 96 years old, when I called her that evening when it was announced, can you imagine? Can you just imagine to have a black president? And he did a marvelous job in the midst of being restricted in a number of ways by Congress. There were so many that we were still held back. We should have had a person on the Supreme Court. He was due that. But Congress saw to it that he did not have that opportunity and would not even interview his recommendation. And so we still have a long ways to go. As a matter of fact, at this particular juncture, I won't say that we've stepped back.
You would say that.
But I think what has happened is, as someone said, those individuals, and I'm trying to decide which hat am I wearing right now, because all of the organizations with which I'm affiliated, they are non-partisan. And so I'm speaking from a policy perspective. Okay, from a policy perspective, when you look at the Constitution and the rights of individuals. We have a population of individuals who do not believe in the Constitution or the equality of all people.
Yeah.
And they have taken off their sheets.
Yes.
And so we know who they are now.
Yeah.
We know who they are. When I drive around and I see the flags, or I see big trucks passing me with flags, it's that to me that equates it's a sign, it's a symbol. I know who I am looking at, and I know it is someone that does not want me to be here, at least holding myself in a certain position.
Absolutely.
Okay. They would like for me to be subjected to them.
Yes.
And so the signs are there, and we know.
I'm glad that you brought that up, because we've actually talked about that before on the show with respect to the flags and the way that what I always say is people having a flag in the country, especially we're not on the coast, we're not bordering any, people having a flag in a place like where I live in Phoenix, it's like wearing a shirt with your address on it in your own house. Like who are you really trying to show that to? Well, why are you going so hard? Who needs to see that? Like, we know where we are. This is clearly it's America. We didn't just get here. We're deep in the middle of the country. The state is landlocked.
Yeah.
So,
but when they began that, I wanted to flip the switch on them with that. I really think we all should have gotten flags and started. I mean, really.
Took it away or owned it ourselves.
They don't own it.
Yeah. It belongs to all of us. That's
belongs
another
to
thing
all
we
of
talk
us.
about. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But so, not to get too far away from it, the Souls to the Polls. So I think it's worth mentioning that historically, so once upon a time, when black people first got the right to vote, my understanding is that black people exercised that right to the degree that they were able. There was, of course, tremendous aggressive voter suppression initially, but you know, if and when and where they could, black folks got out and voted, right? That was the primary means of making sure that your voice was heard once upon a time. There was no Instagram to share photos. There was none of that stuff back in, you know, the early 1900s, late 1800s. And so over the years, my understanding is that black folks have become, or the feeling has been that system does not work for black people. It does not accurately reflect their voice. They feel further disenfranchised. In fact, I shared this on the show before, but I saw something on Netflix once upon a time. This might have been 3-4 months ago, where it quantified the value of a vote from a white male in Wisconsin and compared the value of that vote to a person, just anybody living in Southern California. And as it turns out, that vote from Wisconsin, a place where there's not a lot of population, actually carries about 1.75% voting weight. And then the person in California, it's like a fraction of a percent. And so historically, my understanding is that black folks have really felt that their vote doesn't really count for as much. And so the engagement, the drop off in terms of the engagement over the years, it certainly is based on something, right? So these initiatives, these souls to the polls, and of course, obviously with Obama becoming president, that I believe is something that can speak uniquely to the black experience and let folks know, hey, look, if we do this all together, we can get out there and make it happen. And it's interesting that there are these forces that attack that one fact. No one's canceling Instagram accounts because Instagram accounts don't change elections. No one's canceling, no one's coming to your job, and you know, none of that sort of stuff. But they'll do their best to keep you from voting. And my understanding is that there was a bill that was introduced in Georgia that no voting would be able to take place on Sundays. And you know, and I know as black people, that bill exists solely to counteract the effects of the Souls to the Polls campaign, and to decrease the amount of overall votes in the next election in Georgia. And as it turns out, that passed, or that my understanding is that passed. It was close, but it did pass. And it's heartbreaking, but I don't want to dwell on that. It shows the motivation and the intention.
That's happening across the country.
Yeah.
Okay. Since the loss of the presidential election, there has been a movement in states, and basically red states across the country, to change the laws as it relates to voting. And I firmly believe that when and souls to the polls, and that is one of them. Another is having to, if you've missed so many opportunities to vote, then your record, your name is taken away from the permanent registry for voting.
Actually, hang on one second. I want to talk about that one. But real quick, I got to do this. If you're just tuning in to Civic Cipher, I'm your host, Ramses Ja. Our guest today is Dr. Camilla Westenberg, and we're discussing some of the voter suppression initiatives that have been campaigned and are now coming to vote around the country. And you mentioned the removal of the early. Well, okay, go ahead.
Well, it's under certain conditions. If
Sure.
you have missed voting X number of times, then your name will be removed. And you may not be notified of that. You will not be. And so if you're expecting to get your ballot, you will not get it because they've removed your name.
Right.
And so that's another way to suppress the vote, simply because you have missed voting 2 times. It's 2 or 3. And then another one is that if you don't have identification, then you have to get a notarized document. Well, the fact is, everyone isn't capable of doing that. You have some people who live in the country, they are long distance away from a notary. They may not have, some people may have never had anything notarized. Just the process of going through to get that done can be problematic for a number of African Americans and other minorities as well. And so that's another way to suppress the vote.
I think it's key to mention here that for those that don't know, that are listening to this conversation, historically, when less people vote, it favors Republican outcomes.
That's true.
Another thing is that these type of practices, coupled with gerrymandering, helps further ensure favorable outcomes for Republicans. Black people, by and large, tend to vote Democrat. And I will add to that in terms of the ideological landscape of this country, most of the people that live in this country tend to have a more liberal philosophy or belief system, and that is reflected in the way that they vote.
Right.
And so the Republican establishment, or the establishment, if you will, that when we trace a lot of what we call white supremacy back, it looks like what the Republican Party looks like today.
Right.
That's just what it looks like. And to a large degree, what it is, and obviously, as of late, they're not really too concerned with hiding that. But it behooves them to suppress as many votes as possible, because historically, folks that do vote Democrat have all their ducks in the row. Their whole life is built around voting. They have for the most part, have the financial freedom to take time to do, jump through a couple of extra hoops. And for the most part, they don't have to, because the laws are not written to suppress their vote. There is no canceling Sunday voting is designed to affect one group of people.
Right.
And I think it's important to mention that, so that we know why they're doing these things.
And again, I have to put this in the context of, it is in fact a red and blue concept, but I have to extract it and take it out and put it into the context of what is a democracy. And with the democracy, everyone should have the opportunity to vote, and that there should be no restrictions placed on you as far as voting. As much as possible, you should have the opportunity to vote, so no restrictions should be placed there. It so happens that those individuals who are of a Republican persuasion tend to want to sway things. The gerrymandering is done when they draw the lines and you get your electoral college and how many votes you get out of a particular area, and that comes out of the census. That's why the census is so important.
Yeah.
Because and we're waiting for the data on that, for the 2020 census, to see how many people they are, where they are, but then the thing is, how do you draw those lines so you can say from this particular area, this is how many individuals or votes that you have from the Electoral College. And that's why in some instances they'll take a historically black college and split it in half.
To diminish the value
the value of it. Right. And it's all a matter of strategy, and it should not be. Yeah. And I would say that to a Democrat, and I would say that to a Republican.
It's a matter of being fair.
It's a matter of being fair.
Absolutely.
Right. And so it's just like the postal system. There were so many things that were being done. I firmly believe now, and I would say this to Donald Trump if he was standing here in front of me, that there were so many things that were done to cheat in this election that, yes, he probably is thinking he won. He probably is. And Juliana and all of them, they probably are thinking, but people came out.
Yeah, to vote.
People came out, and it didn't, and it was like, whoa, what happened here?
I want to re-say what you just said.
And so now there is this big effort. Wow, we couldn't make it happen that way. We couldn't get a second term. So let's change the laws.
Let's change the state of play.
Think about a parent. Okay. All of those parents and their kids are out playing baseball or soccer or whatever it is.
Okay.
Would they encourage their child to change the rules? No. They would tell them, okay, those are the rules of the game. I mean, this is what's building character in your child. Okay. We went into this. These are what the rules are. We played by the rules. You lost this time. That's why you line up and you shake hands at the end and you, whatever it is, a high five or whatever it is, and you take it. You take it, realizing you did the best that you could. Cheating here, though. I mean, with the postal system, there was cheating. Since when do you have mailboxes? When do you have mailboxes taken out and sorters taken out? So, the system, we have some players that are not fair players, is what it comes down to, who do not believe in democracy, and they are not adhering to democracy, and they are about the business right now of trying to change the rules. And with that being said, the only thing I can say to people who are listening, you better get in the game.
There it is. That's
you
why you
better get
come up.
in the game. Okay, look at what's going down. On the 6th, we almost lost our democracy.
January 6th.
Yes. Can you imagine if someone had gotten all of those if someone had gotten their hands on it, we would be in complete disarray now. Because that was an attempt to take over this country. And so we've got to play the game, and we've got to play the game hard. I mean, you cannot be complacent. And the other thing I want to say is this notion of fakeness. Things being fake news, fake. I believe in the free press.
Okay.
I believe in that. Some countries where it's authoritative, you don't have the free press. I believe in the free press. I believe that there are conservative stations and that they should be there. Okay, I have no problem with that. But that does not mean that some of your more liberal stations are fake. And people are going to have to be able to look at things, digest it, and make decisions for themselves. It's an interesting dumbing up of society right now, where there are things and you can see it right in front of you, but you don't believe it because someone has told you it isn't so. Because someone has told you it isn't so. So that means that you have lost your mental capacity to think,
to reason
for
yourself. I want to give some life to this. So, there was something you said earlier, and I wanted to restate it because, again, folks need to know. Yes, we did accomplish something major by voting Donald Trump out. And I think we did that more than elect Joe Biden. We voted Trump out. Yeah. Right? It took all of us. We all came together. We all voted. And as you stated, Donald Trump absolutely stacked the deck in his favor.
He did.
He stuffed the box. Like you said, there was, and the post office was just one thing.
Yeah.
He had a number of things that he enacted to ensure a victory, and just the overwhelming amount of folks that came out and voted.
Appointed so many judges.
And then just ran headfirst into it, confident and cocky as ever. But when we made our voices heard through voting, so everyone that did vote, thank you for listening. And everyone who didn't,
yes,
we're going to need you. We're going to need you next time around. We need the midterm elections. We need everything. We need your voice and and even for those who are on the fence, we need you to do some soul searching and really take inventory of who you are and who you want to be and how you want. Do you want this to be a world based in divisiveness and fear, or one that's based in love and kind? And I'm not saying which is which. I'm saying decide for yourself. But I will say this: if Jesus Christ were alive, because a lot of folks try to vote like Jesus, I can't make a case for Jesus being a Republican. That's all I'm gonna say about that. And you can't either. Yeah. And you can find me on the street if you want to have that conversation. But yeah, so this guy, stacks the deck in his favor, loses the election, and then says to everyone that it was stolen from him. And
it's gone to court and has lost every time, single case.
But every case. Because he said it, like you said, you just said this. Because
they still believe it.
Right. And, I read something recently that 50% of white male Trump supporters will not take the vaccine. Yeah. Because, and then Trump, until I want to say yesterday, would not say that he had actually received the vaccine. But he wanted credit for the vaccine. He want, it's just this weird play.
The fact is, he did not. He was not the scientist that.
Of course. But I don't want to give too much credit to this guy. Oh, go ahead.
That's okay.
Go ahead. I lost it. There is something to be said about him losing that election and creating this narrative that the election was rigged, that dead people voted, that immigrants voted, that all this stuff, and all that is it serves as a narrative for these Republicans, because they're all Republican bills that are being introduced to, change the way voting works in all these red states, as you mentioned, what they're going to do is try to take your vote, our vote, away from us, or otherwise make it more difficult. And so we have to be more vigilant, more diligent. Of course, we can speak more intelligently to, the ones that we're aware of, but in the state in which you live, there are some initiatives, especially if you live in a red state, historically red state. Some flip this time, but even battleground states. Those things are things that you need to be on top of, and I know that the NAACP is doing a lot to bring attention to these things. Am I right?
You're right.
Okay.
You're right.
So let's talk about that for a second.
Okay.
What can people do?
Let me tell you where we are.
Yeah.
During the election, we had an initiative. The Political Action Committee had a countdown to 2020. And we did voter registration and mobilization, focusing exclusively on Legislative District 27 in South Phoenix.
Okay.
Young people 18 through 30, unregistered voters. That was our target audience. And there were something like 2,200 and some unregistered voters, 18 through 30, in that legislative district. And we chose that because it had a lower performance rating. And we contacted all of those individuals and then did a second call for anyone who was not at home when we called initially. After we completed that, we went into, after the last day to vote, we went into mobilization. So I went into the NAACP band system and got the list of all of the registered voters there, nonpartisan. And we started calling to tell them, go to the polls, you need to go, you need to go. We would always talk about democracy and humanity and equality. Again, we're nonpartisan, but we certainly can talk about the rights of everyone.
Sure.
Immigrants, whites, Chinese, Asian. We say Asian because we have a problem with that right now. Hispanic, for everyone. Well, now that, and from that, then we called the NAACP president in Atlanta and started doing some calling there. And we hope we helped a little bit with those 2 Senate seats going over. But who knows? But we did do some calling there in Atlanta. So where we are right now, looking at what we are facing, we are getting ready to focus on voter suppression. And the initiative is voting, never going to give it up. Never, 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 never going to give it up. And so we're going to begin engaging in countering pieces of legislation as they hit committee. And what I'd like to do is invite the audience to attend one of our events that's coming up. And I want to pull it up so that I can, and somehow if you can get the information out. But it's Protect the Vote. It is a forum. Mind you, this is a forum. But it is going to be more than that because we're going to be talking about strategies that we can use. And we will have as a special guest speaker, Emily Kirkland, and she's the executive director for Progress Arizona. They monitor the legislation and the bills, and they know as they move through the pipeline from the House to the Senate to committee. And when it reaches committee, they will be filtering into us the date and the time, and then we can begin calling the legislators and letting them know they need some pressure. They need pressure placed on them because they want to stay in their positions, and if they feel that the masses are feeling one way, that's one way you can persuade them to vote in the affirmative, the way that you would like for them to vote.
Sure.
And so we will also have talking points. We will have the day. We will have the time. Now, when I did the last initiative, I had a team of 90 individuals, and we were diligent. I mean, we did the calling.
Going hard.
We did the calling. I mean, we completed the whole batch. And so we want to do the same thing with these bills as they come up.
Okay.
And so on Saturday, we will have Ms. Kirkland, who will be giving us an overview of voter suppression, and then we will start actually the strategic part of having individuals getting the information. This is it. This is the time. This is what you need to say. And individuals are going to need to be dedicated to do that.
Sure.
Okay, and that is going to be on Saturday, March the 27th at 11:30 a.m. And I don't know the link. They'll need to register for it. It'll be a Zoom. And so if you can get that info, I'll send you the information.
I'll make sure it's up on our social media.
If you can get it out to them. But
Civic Cipher.
with the initiative, voting, never going to give it up, we will be looking at voter suppression. We will be looking at gerrymandering, because that is taking place now. We don't know where those lines are going to be drawn.
Right.
But they're waiting on the data from the census to come in that's going to help them in making some of that determination. And from there, they will do the redistricting that's going to determine how many individuals' electoral votes will exist for a particular area. In the midst of that, we're going to continue to do voter registration and mobilization.
Sure.
So for anyone who is turning 18, we're going to hit them up right now. There is no reason to wait until it's election time to say, okay, let's start engaging in voter registration. So we're going to continue with the voter. I'll do a batch of unregistered voters, 18 through 30, and start doing voter registration immediately with them. And then we want to also foster a community partnership. We want to get partnerships with the community. The other thing that under this initiative is a pop-up call to action. An example of that will be Greenwood Cemetery, which is over on where the freeways intersect, where you have I-10 coming in from California and I-17 heading toward Tucson, and you have all of those freeways coming over each other. If you look just west and south, you have Greenwood Cemetery. It's one of the oldest cemeteries, has trees, large monuments. There are a number of our stately African American and minority individuals who are buried there. It is a historical cemetery in Phoenix. And there has been a company who wants to put up a huge sign that will, I guess people can pay to advertise in it, and it will change and flash and everything. And the community has decided that this is a solemn place, a place of rest for our people, many from back in the day, many who are there now. My late husband is there, my mother and aunt is there. There's so many people there. And it is not just African American. One of the Jewish synagogues has a portion of that cemetery as well. And so we have been calling in when it went into zoning to share our distaste with that being bill there. Yeah. And they changed the date on it. There was a variance, and they moved the date. And we called in again, and there was another variance. I think it's the 21st. So we're going to be ready to hit it again and start calling. It's sort of interesting that these variances are coming up. But that's the pop-up call to action, where we know that there are things and we just need to jump on it right away.
Now, let me add this. So basically what I'm hearing is that you're on top of it.
I'm not, let me tell you, I have some young people who are
more so.
who really, I'm an educator. I'm not in politics. I'm retired and I'm just moving into this. There's a sensibility about it. Let me put it that way.
Sure. But there's for folks that do live in Phoenix or in Arizona, and again, I'll put that information up on our social media at Civic Cipher. It's really easy to find those links, but there are some national initiatives as well that the NAACP is taking on. So our folks that listen beyond the state of Arizona can engage as well. And I think that's just a matter of finding out about your local branch in whatever city you're in, and finding out what action they're taking with respect to voter suppression, or if it's something that, like we're talking about here in Arizona with, the cemeteries, things like this. But to one degree or another, in any way that you can, it's important to become engaged and become active.
Exactly.
This is what happens for the Republicans. They get active and they shape the world that they want to see for themselves and their posterity. But the language that ourselves and our posterity, that language exists for the whole country. The thing is, we have to, actually step up and take advantage of that. Before we get out of here, I do want to take some time. And if you're just tuning in, by the way, this is Civic Cipher. I'm your host, Ramses Ja. My guest today is Dr. Camilla Westenberg. And I wanted to take a moment to discuss something that happened this week in Atlanta. And it was, there were 8 people killed by a shooter. It was a mass shooting. And 6 of those people were Asian. Now, a lot of folks may not know this, but before I sat down to do this show, I spoke with my older brother. For those who are fans of boom bap hip hop, my older brother, his name is Raka, or Ira Science of the Dilated Peoples, and just big brother to little brother. He told me something that was very profound. He said, make sure that you know that you're not the only one. You might have to go first, but you're not the only one. There are other people who might not be able to have a voice, a platform, a stage, and you have to be able to look out for those people too. And that's something that was echoed to an incredible degree last year with respect to this We Rise in Solidarity language that I heard so much when we were protesting. And then, of course, out on the streets, we saw, again, approximately, if I'm guessing, 10% black folks out there. 90% of humanity showed up. All colors, all languages, all faiths, religion, everything. Human beings showed up for their African American brothers and sisters. And so it is a privilege and an honor to be able to bring attention once again on this show, because this is not the first time that we're doing this, but to bring attention to the issues that are affecting our Asian American brothers and sisters. And it feels like I'm fulfilling my promise to my brother to be able to use a black space to lend some time to what my Asian brothers and our Asian brothers and sisters are going through. Now, for those of you who don't know much about the story, somebody walked into some massage parlors. 6 Asian women lost their lives, and there were 2 other people that lost their lives that were not Asian, is my understanding. But it feels very targeted. And that's what I want to say. And the mayor of Atlanta. So what happened is the police came out and says that it's not racially motivated. I guess the shooter himself said that it's not racially motivated, for whatever that's worth. The way that they're trying to chronicle the story is that somehow this is a result of this guy's sexual frustration or something like that, right? These massage parlors and so forth. But really what it is these are people, low-wage workers, and, whatever. But, and the mayor, kudos to her for standing up for these people, saying that we're not going to let any victim blaming take place, or victim shaming take place. There's no reason to think that these weren't
establishments
legitimate businesses. Exactly. And so kudos to her for saying that. But regardless of what this person's intentions were, I want to use this time to say that this past year, the previous administration put a target on the back of our Asian brothers and sisters by calling it the China virus.
He did. Mm-hmm.
And the truth is that there's a lot of uneducated people that live in this country, and not a lot of people who have not traveled. I've traveled. I've been to China and Thailand and Indonesia and Vietnam and Singapore and Malaysia and
Okay.
I was out there. Okay. These are different groups of people. But if you say China, Chinese, anything, there's people that think it's all one group of people, right? But it doesn't matter, because even if it is, even if everyone's Chinese, the way that man described it made it seem like it was these people's fault.
Yeah.
And so I can use this moment to speak to the pain, perhaps, that is being endured by my Asian brothers and sisters, having to read this. These are people that wept with me when we saw George Floyd lose his life. They marched and they yelled Breonna Taylor's name. And so for me, I think it's important to bring attention to that, to say that we do stand with you. We condemn that on every level, and that we are always going to champion a fair narrative for
prior to this happening, to the shooting that took place at the three establishments, there had been a series of instances where people were going up and knocking down and shoving down Asian elderly individuals. It was the saddest thing. Men and women, the elderly.
Oh yeah, we talked about
just
that.
going and just shoving them. I mean, it hurts me to think about it. And then you had this to happen, and recently, my understanding is statistically, there have been more complaints as it relates to women. Now, think about it. As African Americans, we've been a target all along.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, we know that. Well, we've been a target. But you have a female who is vice president, a female, okay? And she is of Asian descent. And then you have him talking about the China virus. How about that? And you have this huge cohort of people who will believe absolutely anything that is said. Okay. Then that to me is half of the story there. And I just want to very quickly say, this business of not believing in science. For anyone who does not believe in science, you don't get in a helicopter that science was used to decide or determine that device, that machinery is going to work, and go into a hospital that is grounded on scientific discovery, and then come back out to the world and say, I don't believe in science. Then I say to any people, you need to start thinking.
Well, we'll leave it right there. You need to start thinking. Once again, thank you for checking out Civic Cipher. Once again, my name is Ramses Ja. Q Ward will be back with us next week. My guest, it's always a pleasure to have you up, Dr. Camilla Westenberg. Thank you for coming. Be sure to check the website, civiccipher.com, to download this and previous episodes you may have missed if you're tuning in late or anything like that. Of course, you can also follow our social media. It's always at Civic Cipher, and please consider donating. It really helps the show out, and all our donation links are on the website. So until next week, y'all, take care and peace.